Hola, my beautiful humans. This is Jasmine Castillo, and I bring stories and cases from the people of color community, bringing awareness of murdered and missing Indigenous women, girls, two spirits, the LGBTQ community, Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander, Black Indigenous people of color. These are their stories. So, welcome to Hands Off, my podcast. Based on FBI reports, in November of 2022, 183 open cases of missing Indigenous persons in the New Mexico and the Navajo Nation. However, this data is definitely out of date and hasn't been updated since. And Tiffany's Reid's case is one of the many stories from the missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, two spirits. I had the honor of speaking with Deiandra Reid, Tiffany's sister. Tiffany's family has been searching for her for over 20 years. Tiffany was only 16 years old when she went missing and would be 36 years old this year. Her family has been using traditional methods such as foot-on-the-ground searches, printing flyers, and word of mouth. Let's dive right in, shall we? We've got a lot to cover.
My name is Deiandra Reid. My sister is Tiffany Reid. She's been missing now for 20 years as of May 17th, 2024. She went missing off the Navajo Nation in Shiprock, New Mexico. And since she's been missing, it's just been quite a journey for us. During the time that she went missing, our technology was not advanced as it is today. So a lot of our outreach has been through just boots on the ground work, doing our own searches, printing our own flyers, and just basically through word of mouth. It was hard to be in two places at once. Our mom wanted to be out there, being, keeping herself busy and looking for my sister. And at the same time, she wanted to be at home by the phone in case somebody called. So during that time, it had just been it really had been hard. And our mom was battling breast cancer during that time. And so her health, took a turn for the worse during that time. And so our focus kind of shifted, and we left our trust within the Navajo Nation Police Department, thinking that they were helping us in the search of finding my sister Tiffany. So we entrusted her into them to help us, which during that time, it wasn't the front center focus for them. So during this time that we were focused on my mom's health, my sister got purged from the system, and we were unaware of that. And we didn't find out until 2018 is when we finally had notification that she wasn't entered into the NCIC database or re-entered. And how this came about, us finding out, was because there was a local girl who got arrested, and she was identifying herself as Tiffany. And during that time, I had a cousin that worked as a community police officer with the Farmington Police Department, which is a border town to Shiprock. So she was on duty at the time, and she went to the jail to find out what was going on because, she heard my sister's name over the radio. And that was how we found out she wasn't re-entered into the NCIC database. So then that was a whole nother process. And that was maybe, I want to say 15 years later after she went missing. So that, there was a 15-year gap of her not even being entered into the database. And it's like, why? The system completely failed her in that, in that area. And so it was really disheartening, especially for my mom. She's fighting for her life, and just to find out that my sister wasn't even in the system, it just I'm sure it took a whole nother toll on her. And finding a way to get her re-entered into the NCIC database was a whole nother obstacle within itself. They couldn't find the original case number of the first initial report. And so we had to go through a lot of barriers to recreate a whole nother missing person report like 16 years later. And that was through the U.S. Marshal that helped us. So it took almost another year for her to be re-entered. And she finally got re-entered in, I want to say, 2021. So it's just a whole frustrating process that I feel could have been avoided completely. The position that I work in now, it has really given me an opportunity to be a part of, I guess, of the movement that has been going on in our area to amplify MMIWR. And so I'm able to sit in on some of the task force meetings and the community meetings and stuff. And one of my questions to them was, how long is it before a person gets purged from the system? And, because there's law enforcement that attend these meetings sometimes. And from my understanding, 30 days after the report is made is when the police department will get notification hey, this person is fixing to be purged. Are there any updates kind of thing? Okay. And then after that, the police department has an additional 30 days to submit that information. Like, yes, this person has been found, or no, they have not been found. Keep them in the database. So that was the first failure right there. Shiprock Police Department had the opportunity to keep my sister within that database, and they missed that window. And we weren't notified of that until 17 years later, 18 years later, about 17. No, I think it was like 15 or 16 is when we found out. So it's just been really, gosh, I don't have words for it. It's just been really frustrating, all the different hoops that we've had to jump through, all the different barriers that have been placed before us. And now it's 20 years later, and I don't have any kind of updates or anything.
Thank you, Deiandra. Wow. That's one of the things that for a person who follows information about reports, like I always check periodically, if someone's still in the system, if I need to continue to look for them, if I need to keep bringing awareness to their missing. And if they're not in there, there's two things that could happen. They were found and they're home safe, or the other situation where they're found, but they weren't safe. So we go based on that, and to not have that ability to know from which way, any updates in regards to your sister missing, that would have been on the top of her head. Oh, she must have been found, so I will just continue looking for her. And that's very frustrating to know that you had to go through that. And 15 years later, you didn't even know that she wasn't even in the system anymore. So, oh my gosh, it is so frustrating. I am sorry that you're going through that.
Thank you. It's just, it's been a whole different journey for me. I think, with all the failures in her case and all the gaps that her case had fallen through, it has really just inspired me to find a way to help, find a way to help other families to avoid this type of situation, to help the other families who are going through a similar situation better navigate themselves. We don't have advocates on the Navajo Nation. And if we do, they're spread far in between. And a lot of the families on the Navajo Nation and the bordering town where I live, we do our own advocating for our loved ones. We do our own searches. We do our own outreach. I mean, basically do our own investigation, and everything that we find out, we give to the police. This is what we found out. This is what people have called us with and told us the stories that we've heard. And it's like they take that information, but they don't run with it. They're like, okay, well, we'll look into it. But do they even look into it? So as of today, a lot of the information or like the tips or stories or anything that I hear, I don't even bother including Navajo Nation, like the Shiprock Police Department or the Shiprock Criminal Investigators Office. I take my stuff straight to the U.S. Marshals because they are the ones who have really been helping me, and it's not even really their case, but they're there. They're there to listen. They're there to empathize with me and to actually sit and listen. Within the last 3 years, I've spoke with 5 different police officers from the Shiprock Police Department who have asked me all the same questions. And it's so, I don't know a better word for frustrating, but at the same time, it like infuriates me because why are you guys asking me the same thing over and over? Don't you guys share information with each other? Don't you communicate within your department? Don't you have this information in her file? Why are you coming to me and re-traumatizing me and re-triggering me and all the things that come with it when you guys have the ability to work with one another in community and to be, I mean, isn't that what you're there for? It's, it is, it's frustrating, and it can be a really traumatic experience for somebody who is fresh into this movement, who is freshly into advocating for their loved ones. And it really puts a gap and a barrier between the families and the law enforcement, because the law enforcement is not trauma informed. They don't have that approach to working with the families. And a lot of their questions and their comments come off as judgmental. And that makes the family not even want to speak with them. They don't want to go through with the questioning. They don't want to go through with filing the police report, because a lot of the officers like to place blame. They victim blame. And their approach is, it's awful. And that's a similar thing that my mom went through when she filed the missing person report for my sister. She called her the very next day, or she called the police department the very next day to tell them, my daughter hasn't been home since yesterday, and I want to know what's going on. I need to file a missing person report. And she did this after she called the school, to see if my sister made it to school the next day on May 18th. But the school notified her, no, she didn't make it to school, nor was she in school yesterday. So that's already 24 hours, over 24 hours that she had been missing, and we didn't even know. And the whole time we thought she did make it to school, and, she left after school to go hang out or whatever. But instead of taking the report right then and saying, okay, we have a missing 16-year-old, they asked my mom, does she have a history running away from home or like taking off? And she's a teenager. What teenager has not snuck out before, And so she told the officer, yeah, she has a couple of times, but it's not like a recurring or like something that she does all the time, And that's what they ran with. Okay, well, since she's ran away before, maybe she just ran away again, and, they made her wait longer. It shouldn't matter if she ran away or not. She's still a minor under 18, and that doesn't make it okay. Just because she did it before doesn't mean it gives you the reason to dismiss her for another 3 days. And so they told my mom to wait 72 hours to file the missing person report. 72 hours came, filed the report, and then they didn't put it in until like 4 days later into the system. So a whole week had already gone by before she was even entered in. Within that week, she could have been picked up by local law enforcement in like the neighboring communities, like the Farmington area. And they didn't know she was missing, so they would have just let her go. Sheriff department, they would have just let her go. Anywhere that she would have been outside of the Shiprock community if she got picked up. They had no idea that she was missing. And that is also, I mean, it's just frustration all around. It's just let down all around. It's just injustice to her and to us. And we're still trying to find answers. We're still trying to figure a way. How can we, get closure? How can I get closure? My mom passed on. Our mom is gone now. And so I'm in this fight by myself right now. And that was the only thing she asked me before she left, was to keep looking for my sister. And that's the thing that keeps me going. That's the thing that keeps the passion, the fire burning within me. It's not just for my sister, but it's for all community members in our area, because the missing and murdered it's too high in the community that we live in the area that we live in the Four Corners region. And I'm just alongside the other families trying to find a way that we can get the support that we need, the resources that we need, advocating for change, advocating for a difference, advocating to our nation president, the Navajo Nation president, to implement something that will help alleviate this crisis within our area. I don't know what it's going to take for them to realize that this issue is not going to go away by itself. If you don't think about it, it's not going to go away. If you don't address it, it's not going to go away. It's only going to get worse. You have to get in front of it and stop it and do something and prevent it and bring the education, bring the awareness, whatever it takes, get in front of it and help save somebody else's family member from becoming a victim of MMIWR. That's just how I feel right now.
Yeah. Your message has been received, and I feel you. I hear you. This is something that I have been trying to push on my podcast because it's been a blind eye turning. It's not, if it's not a person of a particular category, then it's no interest to me. And it just, some of the words is infuriated, frustrated, enraged that, my brothers and sisters are from the Indigenous community are being treated like this. This is something that has been going on for centuries, and it's something that it needs to stop. It needs to bring more stronger voice awareness that, there's got to be something. There has to be something. And I know that I've been talking a lot with other organizations who are Indigenous-based organizations, like the forensic organization that's, as well as like they're trying to create database for Indigenous missing persons so they can be in control of taking care of finding their families and properly abiding by the traditions when they are found and bringing them home. So it's a long, hard battle, and to have you fight even more, to knowing that your sister wasn't even being looked for because of the system had not only traumatized you and your mother, but literally re-traumatized and re-victimized your sister. She's being dismissed in society, being dismissed even in the database, in the system. I'm just enraged. I'm so angry that this is happening. And I thank you for sharing your story about Tiffany and your family and your journey to bring awareness to you and your
Yeah.
and people that are going through the same situation as well. Mm-hmm.
I mean, I could sit here and, be mad at all the failures in the system, but what good is that going to do me? Just sitting back and watching them do this over and over again to, the families who have been experiencing this and who are just freshly coming into this. And I think that's what really gave me motivation to go back to school, to better myself, to do something and be a part of the movement and to help things shift in a more positive way. I know that it does take a lot. It really does. Being a full-time mom and a full-time student and a full-time, you know, having a full-time job, it's like, where do I find the time for myself? And that's something that really, it took me a while to figure out, but the the passion that I have, not only just helping my sister, but like being there for other families, it fills me in a whole different way and it keeps me on track and it brings me back down. Like there are times, yes, I do. I feel like I want to give up. I feel like nothing's happening. They're not hearing us. They're not hearing me. What am I doing wrong? Where am I lacking? I'm done. I don't want to do it anymore. But when I start to feel that way, there's always somebody that reaches out to me and tells me, I look up to you and everything that you do. You inspire me to do this. You inspire me to do that. I heard your sister's story and you're such a strong person for fighting for this long. And it brings me back to why I even started this mission. And I'm going to continue it until I get closure, until I help other families get closure, until we can get the resources that we need. Right now in New Mexico, there aren't any resources for impacted family members or the surviving children of, missing murdered Indigenous relatives. The only the only resource that has been provided has been recent, and it's through the organization I work for, which is the Coalition to Stop Violence Against Native Women. And they have partnered with CBRC and a sister organization called Three Sisters Collective. And they were able to allocate funding to help families of MMIWR with $3,000 check, to help them with like their rent or searches, flyers, to help the children of those who are missing or have been murdered. Just whatever it's not specific to their usage, but whatever helps lighten some of that burden and to just give them a little bit of breathing room. I know $3,000 isn't much, but it's a start. And I would really like to see more resources out there, more so for the kids who have a missing or murdered parent. How can we get them benefits? How can we provide them with, they should have everything taken care of. They shouldn't have to worry about anything. They should have that education. They should have that health care. They should have like the food, they shouldn't have any food insecurities. They should always have a place to live until they're able to take care of themselves. And a lot of these children, they're just left back behind. Nobody, nobody asks about them. What about their mental health? What about their physical health? Some of these children may not have the best health that and they're being left behind. They're not being cared for, or they are being cared for, but by family members who probably don't even really want to take care of them, by family members who are too old to take care of them, disabled. You know what I mean? It's just so much. And there just needs to be a better way of navigating all of this and finding funding and the resources for these families specifically instead of trying to squeeze them in somewhere wherever they could fit in. And I think that just it makes it worse. It makes them not want to ask for help. It makes them not want to reach out because nobody understands what they're going through. And that's the reason why I love this position that I'm in, is because I work directly with the families of MMIWR, and I could sit there with them and tell them, I know what you're going through. I know what it feels like. I know, instead of coming in with just the book knowledge of it and not really understanding what they're going through. I can sit there with them and cry with them and tell them, and we could share stories. And that's what makes the community stronger for me, is because we know people could tell us all the time, I'm sorry, I know what you're going through. I know how this feels, but they don't know it unless they've experienced it. And I have experienced it. I have that lived experience. So I can share my frustrations with them without feeling guilty. I could sit there and cry with them because I know that hurt. And I could tell them all the things that I have, like the ideas that I have and the things that I want to do, and hope somebody joins me and wants to be a part of that and finding solutions of how we can make things better for our people, especially for our children, and helping them to understand like what MMIWR is, what it really means, what the history is, and how, how did it go from being swept under the rug to being exposed? And that's basically what I'm trying to do, is to spread that awareness, to prevent it from happening, to have that outreach. But then again, in my tradition, on the Navajo tradition, they always say, don't talk about it. It's taboo to talk about it. But if we don't talk about it, like, how are we going to help anybody by just leaving it alone? It's not going to help the issue, and it's not going to make it better. And it's not just going to go away. If anything, it's just going to get worse.
So thank you so much, Deiandra. So coming from a perspective, like you mentioned, for people who are wanting to fight that fight, but haven't had the story that's similar in your struggle, what can a person like myself, a person of color, or anybody other person who's wanting to help share, bring awareness, what would you like from us to help from our for your community and for your organization and for our people, for the people of your Indigenous community?
For me, I think just what you're doing now, you're reaching out to families, and we're sharing our story with you, and you're broadcasting it for us. That's a big thing. Another thing would be to donate maybe to a nonprofit organization that works with people, with the families of MMIWR. It's, in all reality, it's the nonprofit organizations that do the heavy lifting of this work, and we don't get enough recognition for it. I mean, we're out here trying to find the grants and the funding to help us with helping the families. The position that I have, it's land and body violence, or I'm the coordinator for land and body violence, which, it has a lot to do with MMIWR because of the extractive industries, sorry. And they bring, the man camps here to pump the oil and to do all the things that they do to extract natural resources, And that's where a lot of the violence happens, where a lot of the missing happens and the murdering happens of the Indigenous women and even the men as well. A lot of our men are starting to go missing, and they could be victims of human trafficking, labor trafficking. I mean, we're right next door to, I'm in the Four Corner area, and we've had a big issue I think it was last year and the year before, with the insurance fraud of the people coming and recruiting people saying, yeah, we're going to take you to treatment. And they were stealing our people right in front of us. And now those people are far worse off than they were when they got picked up. The people who posed as treatment centers were just introducing them to worse drugs that were just aiding them in their addictions and making it worse. And then they were just leaving them on the streets. And a lot of them are lost. A lot of them don't know how to get home, can't make it home. I mean, we've had people that were driving buses down there to look for their relatives, to pick them up off the streets and bring them home. And we're so vulnerable. It's because there's not enough education out there on this. People aren't really aware of what's going on, and it's just really frustrating. So I think a lot of the nonprofit organizations are the ones who do all the legwork, are like boots on the ground. And I mean, there's the Canine Search and Rescue here in our area, which is also a nonprofit. They could always use some donations there. They go out with their drones, their dogs, on horses, and any type of weather to help families search, because we don't have a task force within the police departments in this area to do searches like that. So the families are turning to this nonprofit to help them. And that's what I mean. We need more resources here. We need more funding to expand these little bits of resources that we have, and to do a better job, to get into the schools. And that's another barrier, because you have to get the approval of the parents. And a lot of the parents they don't want you teaching that stuff to their children. And I don't know. There's just so many things that just push back, especially on the Navajo Nation. This past week, we had a tribal leader summit in Albuquerque at the Isleta Resort and Casino. And our organization, we invite all these different tribal leaders, councilmen, and stuff from all the tribes in New Mexico to come and collaborate and share some of the things that they're doing in their communities to amplify the awareness, what worked for them, what hasn't worked for them, and just to collaborate and share ideas. And every year, it's always the Pueblo nations that come in. Every single year they come. Their governors come, their council members come, but the Navajo Nation is never there. And they are the ones who need the structure the most. And it's like, how can we get you guys in there? And so one of my thing is, instead of going to the Navajo Nation president and telling them, this is what's going on, this is what we're offering, we would like you to be a part of this, I think my next mission is to go to each of the chapter houses on the Navajo Nation, as many as I can, and kind of give them a little, like a little presentation of, this is what this is, and this is what we offer, this is what we have. I mean, we give technical assistance, we do trainings, we do training and education and technical assistance and resources. We like to share the resources that we can find with the communities, and we can't do that with them because they push back. They push back all the time, and it's like, why? You guys need this stuff. You need to know that we're here, and how can we work together instead of against one another.
Pueblo is always showing up, but Navajo is one of the ones that, and I was going to mention, like, there's a saying, the squeaky wheel gets the oil when it
Yes.
agrees. So if you don't
Mhm.
acknowledge that you need help and you're not voicing your help and you're voicing your needs and you need to bring awareness to, no one's going to know that you needed help.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's so true. So, thank you so much again, Deiandra.
I think that anything that has to do with indigenous communities is never it's never at the forefront. It's, nobody really cares, or maybe there are people that care, but nobody really wants to talk about those issues because a lot of it, it leads back to colonization
Mhm.
and nobody wants to be called out about that. So I think they just kind of let it be like it's not our problem, it's not our issue. Oh, they're sovereign government, they're sovereign nations, so we'll just leave it at that kind of thing. That's my opinion.
Mm. I'm trying to thinking from me looking in, because it's been something that has been addressed and been identified that Indigenous communities want to bring awareness and to take care of their own, and and any outside force is could be and could mess things up or could make things worse or could. But when someone is trying to help out and to bring awareness and to say that, I want to help, they also feel like there's a restraint in how a person can help because of the regulations and the respect and the traditional ways that are done properly from your community versus someone looking in. They want to be respectful, but they don't know where we can fit in helping. So that's probably where people are like, my perspective. I'm just trying to think like outside of perspective, but it could be people are wanting to help, but they don't want to be disrespectful. So I think the question would
I
be
think
to ask the people, ask the community, what would you like me to do? And that's how you solve the
yeah,
problem, right? So,
I think that's where cultural competence comes in, is where like a lot of the nations do want to do things themselves because they have their own way of doing things, especially when it comes to like funeral ceremonies. There are a lot of tribes that have a lot of different beliefs in how they wanted to send their loved one off, back to the spirit world. And I think sharing certain parts of their culture with, the people who do want to help, it would help them on both sides to understand, okay, this is how they do it in their village or their community or their nation. And then it would help also the indigenous tribes, the people, to understand, like, they're not all the same. There are those who want to help. And I think it's, there's such a division between indigenous tribes and, the non-indigenous people. And it's it's really it's hard to relate back and forth to one another. And I think that's where a lot of division comes because, you know, like the Anglo people don't understand why Native Americans do some of the things that they do. And Native Americans, they push back a lot because of colonialism, because of all the things that they brought upon our peoples. And I think that's where it's hard to find common ground, to find that equality within each other and to be able to help one another. And I think that's kind of why they just stay apart from each other.
mm-hmm.
But that's just my opinion too.
Oh yeah, for sure. Thank you. Thank you. I want to use my energy towards the community that is needing the help, that's wanting to bring the awareness. Because if I'm telling somebody till I'm blue in the face, we need you to understand this is a crisis. I'm using my energy in the wrong area. It's like it's like you can't
Yeah.
even get across with them. So
Like they have what
yeah.
they call a veil over
Yes.
their vision.
Yes.
And
It's to unravel all the different nuances that are happening in our communities. It's like I'm trying to take a piece of something, try to digest it, try to understand it, and then something else comes up saying, we're being attacked on this side, and we're being attacked on this side, and we're losing our family on this side. And now they're finding another strategic way of erasure and taking their humanity and taking their traditions. And it's like it's being on all angles of our lives. We're fighting, 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 fighting. Like,
and that kind of reminds me of one of the families that I know. Their relative was found deceased, and they were sent to the OMI, and from there, their relative, their relative's deceased body, they cremated it without without notifying the family,
oh my gosh.
and
Oh.
their loved one was written off as a suicide, but
Oh.
and then they cremated the body. So it's like, well, how do you even know it was suicide if you didn't give the family, you know what I mean? Like the
Yeah.
family didn't get the chance to have their closure and to bury their loved one,
Oh.
that the way that their culture, their tradition, you know, in their own traditional way, they weren't able to do that because the state just was like, oh, well, just cremate their body,
Mm.
I'm sure it's fine. And
Yeah.
so,
It
and
sounds
it
like there's more to it than that. There was a reason why they
yeah,
did that, to cover
yeah,
something
I
up.
think so. Yeah. And that's what that's what the family thinks, because their loved one wasn't suicidal
Mm.
and or didn't have, any of the, I
Ideation.
mean, it's not predictable, but yeah, there weren't any indications that this person was gonna had issues of or even thoughts of that.
Hmm.
And no signs or anything. And it's really sad. And there's another family whose daughter was shot in the head, and the police wrote that off as a suicide also. But I mean, like the angle of it was like, how could she shoot herself in that particular part of her head?
Mm.
And then she was written off as a drug addict and an alcoholic, and that's why she was living out of her car, is what they said. But the family knows who their loved one is and what kind of a person they are, and they're like, no, that's
Mhm.
not that's not how she was, that's not how she lived. She had a home, she wasn't an alcoholic, she wasn't a drug user. I mean, there has to be more to that.
Oh, there is.
but the,
Yeah.
but that case got closed, and so I mean, where's her justice? She just got written off as suicide.
Yeah. That's as I'm digging more into the stories of like that similarity in stories is many things. It's human trafficking. Once they're done with the person, they've lived to the pleasures of whatever they were put into the industry to be used for, labor, sex, whichever,
Yeah.
trafficking. They position a person's life and their body by overdosing it to look like they were involved in an overdose, that it was self-inflicted, to cover up the crime that they just inflicted on that person. And that's like double trauma.
Yeah.
Extremely traumatizing, because now the person was lost in the system of trafficking and no one cared. But the family has been looking ever since for them. And then when they find that person, the law enforcement writes it off as this and just closes it and doesn't even give even the time of day to breathe and to understand what is going on for the family to process what's just happened. And they're like, yeah, yeah, it is what it is. And it's like, how can we live with the trust between, you know, calling that's one of the things that people of color, like if we have one of our people missing, it's like we are hesitant to call the law enforcement because we already
Hmm.
know the concept of how they think.
Yeah.
They'll write it off as, oh, they're right away, they'll be back. Or, well, they're an adult, why do you even care what they do with their lives? Whatever. Or,
They're allowed to go missing is another thing. They're allowed to go missing.
yeah,
Or
yeah,
they'll ask about their lifestyle and they're
yep,
like, well, what do you expect? This is the life they live,
exactly.
And it's like, it's still a person. It's still
Right.
somebody's family. It's still a loved one. Like,
And it's been one of those things like it's crazy because we even have to say, like, if we're on a video or if we're talking to somebody, like the first words that come out of our mouths, I'm in not feeling suicidal. I'm not going to go missing intentional. If something happens to me, it wasn't on my own accord. Like we literally have to say these words for people to say, okay, okay, I get it. Then that person, because
mm,
they automatically think, oh, she must have been living a double life, and she's doing all this, and it's insane how we have to bring awareness to other people to say that I am not suicidal, I am not going to hurt myself, I'm not going to go missing, just for people to understand that this is serious. Like, why do we have to even acknowledge that? But we do. We have to every
like you
time
have
we
to
talk.
advocate for yourself before,
Right.
you know? Yeah.
Exactly. Like, but yeah, I'm going off. I apologize, but it's just good information to talk about. This is great that we are bringing awareness to this.
At the time that, my mom had passed, I was just barely starting college. I mean, I had gone to college before, but I just kind of gave up on it. At that time, I was in an abusive relationship, and it was hard for me to pursue my education with, having a partner who wasn't supportive and was overly jealous. So I just kind of gave up on it and just joined the workforce. And my oldest daughter, she was graduating from college, and I told her, well, when you go to college, that's when I'll go back. So lucky me, she went to college right after high school. And so I was like, well, so I started off slow, and I started my first semester in the fall, and like not even a month into into school is when my mom passed. So she didn't get to see any of my accomplishments. But I think it was meant to be that way because school is what helped me get through my grief, is what kept me busy and it kept me going. And I had the services within the school to be able to talk to somebody about all the things that I was going through, and to help me navigate my way and to show me what self-care is, and you know how to really feel my grief without hiding it, without putting it in a box and it, overflowing just one day and going into depression and all the things that come with that. So I think that, you know, that was God's plan for me to be able to have those resources available to me during that time I lost my mom, because it was a really it's a traumatic experience to go through. And so I graduated. Well, I graduated 2 years later with my associate's degree in human services. And my whole thing was to become a juvenile probation officer. And that's why I was going to school. But to be a juvenile probation officer, you have to have a bachelor's degree. So I was like, okay, well, I'm just going to keep going to school. While I'm on this role, I'll just keep it going. And I decided to do an internship with a place called Capacity Builders. And it was a program called Developing Future Victim Specialists. And it just sounds so interesting to me, like, what is this? So I applied and they accepted me. So then I started on a whole nother journey. And this is where I was introduced to advocacy. This is where I really got involved in being able to be the voice for my sister, because I attended a lot of trainings and webinars that was specific to MMIP. And I attended a training one day through the Coalition to Stop Violence Against Native Women, and there was the lawyer David Adams on there that was talking, and he was using my sister's case as an example of like the failures in the justice system. And I was really surprised, like, that's my sister, you know? And that's how I got in connection with David Adams. And I mean, we've had some really good conversations, and, just the support that he's showing to me right now is just that's another part of this component that helps me to keep doing what I'm doing. And so I became, I got my national credentials for advocacy, and then I started attending a lot of the things that the coalition does. But I just couldn't find my way. Like, is this, what do I want to do? Like, I started out wanting to be a part of like the corrections, and this has taken me, and when I started on the road to advocacy, it was just like flowing, and it was just going and going, and I was just networking and meeting all these different people that were like, "Hey, I've heard about your sister." And it's like, wow, there's a whole different world out there in advocating and advocacy. So that's kind of where that, that internship brought me to where I am today, because it opened up a whole new avenue for me. And it took me from corrections. And before I started working with the Coalition to Stop Violence Against Native Women, I was working at a treatment center for women. And, in this treatment center, I couldn't relate to any of them, because I didn't have that lived experience that they have with drug abuse, and it was hard for me to sit there and tell them, like, yeah, I know what you are, because my substance of choice, it was alcohol. And that's kind of how I kind of pushed all these feelings of my sister going missing aside. And that's how I was masking that hurt and, all of that. And then not only that, I was in a toxic relationship. And so that was what I turned to. And that's kind of how, I mean, all that part of my life is kind of like a blur. But once I got sober and decided, like, I have to change my life and I want to do something that's more meaningful and has purpose. And I thought it would be in corrections, but working in that setting, just wasn't filling me. And seeing all these different trainings and stuff that were going on that I was missing out on, it was like, it hurt me, because I knew that this, would help me in my capacity building and providing me with the knowledge of like the things that I need to know, and being an advocate for my sister. So I thought, well, I'm just going to give it a shot, and I did work a lot with them before I became an actual employee with them. I helped them with a couple of their pilot trainings. So we started a law enforcement officer training, to where we go out to these different tribes and we teach well, not really teach, but we kind of show the tribal officers, like, this is what kind of like how to work with the families and in a more trauma-informed approach. And they put me on this advisory committee because I'm the impacted family member, and they wanted me to be able to share all the experiences that I had, and what can we do to avoid these in the future. So we put together this workshop, and we implemented we did this training, and we implemented a workshop into it to give them a chance of a trauma-informed approach. So we would give them a scenario, and, this person's loved one has a substance use disorder and sometimes lives on the streets, but would always stay in contact. and the family hasn't heard from him in this long. And so we would give them like a ABC, like this is the least trauma informed. We would know, so we would ask them, can you pick out the least trauma informed approach? Like, oh, well, that's the life they live. That would be the least trauma informed approach. And then we would ask them, okay, so what is the most trauma informed approach on this out of these three? So they would pick it out, and then we'd give them another option. How would you implement this trauma informed? What can you do to change it? So instead of just sitting there and telling them this is how you would do it, we actually get them engaged with each other and have them work through that to get a better understanding of how to be more trauma informed. And I always say this, I want to see that training expand. I want to see that training turn into one of our 40-hour trainings instead of just 8-hour, And this is just a pilot run. We're going to have our last one of the 3 series on Tuesday in Acoma, Pueblo. And again, Navajo Nation was like, nope, we never got a response from them. But we did get an invite to a sex trafficking training that will be going on. And that's the specific training that they asked for, was the law enforcement officer training, because I guess the law enforcement is going to be there. So I'm really looking forward to that. And I want to see what the outcome is and just what their reaction is, because it's the Navajo Nation training, the sex trafficking training. So I'm like, well, and they asked for me and my coworker by name. So we're like, okay, well, it sounds like, we've been amplifying this enough for them to ask for us to do this training for them. So I'm excited about that. I'm just really excited to be able to get Navajo Nation. You know what I mean? And we're trying to find organizations that we could possibly partner with on the Navajo Nation to help us open up this avenue for us to kind of get in there and to be able to offer this. And I mean, some of the police departments, I'm pretty sure on the reservation, on the Navajo Nation reservation would probably, want this training, but then others, they probably don't. And I know specifically Shiprock Police Department probably won't, because I'm going to be the one helping with this, and on May 17th, just this past week, last week on Friday, myself and some of the family advocates that, I'm in community with, we stood outside the BIA office in Shiprock in front of the criminal investigator's office, and we held our signs. And it's not just my sister that has gone missing from that community. There's Leon Hayes, who I went to school with. There's Christina Carrillo, who lived 2 doors down from where we grew up. Her sister Denise and my little sister grew up together. And myself and Christina, we were friends, when she's missing. There have been so many murders down there that have not gotten any media attention. And there have been bodies that have been found like down the farm roads that, and places that, and it's just really sad because it's such a small town, but it's run over by drugs. Mm. And I feel like, that's where they need the most help, but they're not asking for it, or when it's offered, they don't want it. I just feel like they're in denial, but the evidence is there, all of this is going on.
Yeah.
And I don't think the count will ever be accurate, no matter how much data, how much effort we put into it. It's not going to be accurate. I mean, they're starting from, I feel like they're starting from at a point that doesn't go back far enough. I mean, when the settlers came, that's how far it should be going back.
Exactly.
The boarding school eras and all of that. Like, what do those numbers look like from then to now? Like, yeah. And you guys are saying this is not a problem? It's not a crisis. It's been a crisis since 1493 or 2 or whatever it is.
Yeah, but 1492. I think it was probably even earlier than that. But That's the only documented historical
Mhm.
interaction between someone who wasn't from the Turtle Island.
Yeah.
Uh,
And
s-
it's
yeah.
just really sad how racism is still here, and a lot of us were all descendants of an indigenous tribe, no matter who we are today, because of that reason. A lot of the women and the children got trafficked and they were forced to have kids, or they were raped and they had kids out of that sexual violence. And so it's
Mhm.
like, how could you be that way when, we're probably all descendants of an indigenous tribe from way back then?
Even though Tiffany isn't here presently, physically, she was the one that guided you in the direction that you needed. She was
Yeah.
the link to finding your path. It's a bittersweet, but it was also like there was a reason that you found going from correctional juvenile to advocacy to MMIWR to your path has
Mm.
been guided spiritually by Tiffany. It's awesome.
Yeah. I mean, 20 years it's a really long time,
Yeah.
That's like half my life. And I always wonder what my relationship with her would be like. What kind of an auntie would she be to my kids? What kind of relationship would we have as, sisters? Because she's my only true blood sister. I mean, I have a lot of so our dad, he was married prior, before he married my mom, and he has children with that from that previous marriage. And then he married my mom and had Tiffany and myself, and we were the only two. And then they divorced and my mom remarried, and then she had, she got remarried and she had kids. So Tiffany and I, we're the only two that are together. You know what I mean? Like just she's my full-blooded sister. And not having her, it's
Mm.
not having her here with me, it really it I have a lot of wonder. I have a lot of what if moments. And it's hard. It's hard not having your only one true blood sibling to be there with you, you know?
Just the thought of, just kind of reflecting back to what you mentioned about Tiffany, like the things, like knowing that now you, from having a relationship from being like children, sisters, now you're adult sisters, like what kind of role would you guys have in your lives, what you would be doing right now together? There was so many opportunities and that was taken from both of y'all. I don't know knowing that it's been 20 years of inform history that could have been created between you has been taken. So yeah, I just wanted to mention that to you, that is so hard. That is so hard. But I'm glad that you were able to share this story with me. Thank you so much for your time on this. I was going to, because I go through Facebook, I go through TikTok, and it's like I get these like stories of missing people, and I'm like, no one's sharing them, no one's like reposting them, no one's like bringing awareness to them, and I'm like, I even looked up her name to see if she was in another podcast, and I'm like, I think there is some, but there's not enough. Like, there's got to be more about her. Like, what's going on here? Like, so I wanted to get the truthfulness from a family member who knows what they've been going through and how we can help. So,
Yeah, I think well, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children reached out to me, their media department, and they wanted to do just an kind of like an update on what's been going on and stuff with her case. But I really didn't have anything to give to them. Like I said, a lot of the families, we do our own research, we do our own investigation, and you'd be surprised at some of the things that we could find out. I think, there maybe are times that we even get more information than the police can. And that's really all I've had to offer. I mean, my sister growing, she had a huge love for animals, especially kittens, and she wanted to be a veterinarian when she grew up. You know, that's what she wanted because she really loved animals. And when she was a kid, she was really quiet. It was hard for anybody to get her to talk, you know? And I couldn't see that. Like, she was my sister. We'd laugh and we joke and have our moments, you know, our little arguments and stuff. But to me, she wasn't quiet. I think I was probably the closest person to her. I was able to get her to speak up and talk. And I think she really looked up to me for a lot of things, you know, because we were opposites. She was really introverted and quiet, and I was outgoing and loud. And I think she really looked up to me for that, you know, like sticking up for her and just being her voice for her when, and even now, you know, even now, I'm still trying to be her voice and trying to get her story out there. And but when she went missing, she was only 16, and she was in the age of discovery. She was trying to figure out who she is, and I guess just who she was. She was coming out of her shell more. She really liked to sing. That was one of her biggest things, you know. She used to sing a lot. She used to sing to Selena a lot, and she used to write her own little mixes, and could hear her in the room. And that time, you know, we didn't have all the up-to-date stuff they have now. So she's sitting there with the record button, you know, with those little tape recorder things, and rewinding it back, listening and re-recording, and could just hear her pushing the buttons in the other room. But she was really just coming into her own and truly discovering who she is as a, you know, as a teenage girl, and experimenting, you know, or just kind of figure out who she is and who she wants to be. And at the time she went missing, I wasn't living at home with them. I was living with my partner at that time, and I was a young mom. I had my oldest daughter when I was like 18, and so I didn't, you know, I wasn't home with her during those crucial moments of her teenage years. And but I still, you know, I still kept in contact with her a lot, and we were still close. It was just different. Me being a new mom, and her living at home without me, and we were still adjusting. And I feel a lot of guilt for not being there for her when she needed me. I think during the time she went missing, she was kind of hanging out with people that she probably shouldn't have been hanging out with. And so I started to notice a little shift in the, her attitude and things. And before I could figure it out, you know, she went missing. And I always wonder if the people she was hanging out with during that time, like if they had something to do with it, or if they know something, or they exposed her to something. I don't know. I just want some answers, you know? I just want that closure, and to be able to finally breathe like good a good healthy, like, just to let it all go and feel that relief, even though, you know, something bad might have happened to her. At least I have that weight off me of trying to find her and trying to figure out what happened to her. I think that's one of the things that I carry with me all the time, and I'm always probably going to carry it with me until I get what I need and the closure that I need for myself. Before my mom passed, she made me promise her to keep looking, to keep looking for my sister. And that's all she wanted, was to find her baby before she left, And that didn't happen. So now that's my mission before before it's my time to go. I'm going to do all that I can to find her. And if I can't, I have 4 kids that can continue to carry that torch for me, and just advocating and being there for her, being her voice when I can't be. My youngest son, he's only 7 right now, and he's the one that he's my tail. So I take him to a lot of the different events and stuff that go on, and the things that we do. When he doesn't like it. He gets bored and he's like, "What are we doing here? I don't understand what's going on." But I feel like he's going to be the one, he's going to remember all these marches and all these rallies and the workshops that I've done, and what MMIWR is. And I think he's going to be the one that's going to take after me in the work that I'm doing. He's really artistic. He's real vocal. And so I think he's going to be the strong one to carry this, to continue this work and keep it alive for our family and for the other families who are struggling with this, MMIWR crisis. So poor thing, I drag him along with me to all the different things that I do, and all the advocating that we do in our community.
Yeah, I have a tale like that. My 12-year-old, like we do marches and we do protests. He's like, he's
Yeah.
the same mentality. Like, Mom, God, like, why are we all here in this hospital? And I had to explain, like, this is a mother, this is a sister, this is a friend, even though they're considered like a stranger to us, because we didn't know them until I, started talking with their family, and so we're down here to support the family. And it's almost like you can see the wheels turning on, as they get older, like, oh
Yeah.
wow, that's how we show that we care. This is how we show that we can amplify their voice by tagging the line and carrying the signs and shouting and protesting and standing in front of the BIA office and showing your signs and showing that you're, enough is enough. We need justice. We need something from, to help us. So that is interesting. But I was always thinking to myself, like, I'm hoping the next generation is a generation that will find closure and that they won't
Mm-hmm.
have to have this carried on to the next generation and the next generation.
Yeah.
A lot of things
I
are
hope they
coming.
work us all out of a job.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I'm hoping that we no longer have to do these marches. Everyone that has been missing has been found, has given their proper traditional respect, and we don't
Yeah.
have to worry about this anymore. But until that happens, we have to hand that torch down until our job is done.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm first generation everything, nobody in my family, when I graduated from college, nobody in my family had made it that far. And nobody knows what advocating is in my family. And so, like I said, I'm first generation everything. And to have, my oldest daughter, she's a college graduate now. And I have my second daughter who's fixing to graduate. I think we're going to both be graduating in next May. So, I feel like I'm the cycle breaker of all of this.
Yes.
And
Proud mama.
my sister and I, we grew up in a family where there was violence, there was alcohol abuse and violence, and that already put us in the statistic, to where we would be in that same situation. And I was. I was already, I was an alcoholic. I was in an abusive relationship. So, I mean, it's really sad to know, this is what my mom went through would be something that I would more likely experience in my adulthood. And it was. So for me to call myself a cycle breaker, it makes me feel good to know that we can make these changes for our children in our family and redirect that path so that they don't have to go through any of those experiences.
Absolutely.
And I'm just really, when I did it as a single mom, my own mom, she was one of the strong matriarchs behind that. Despite all the things she was going through, it started from like the alcoholism to the abuse to sobriety to cancer, and losing her daughter in between all of that. Like those are some heavy hitters, like some major moral breakers to make you want to give up and to not want to go on anymore, but she did. And for her to help me raise my girls, that's the biggest plus I could have because they know how strong she was. And there's no doubt in my mind that she passed some of that, her knowledge and stuff to my girls and to me. And now when I look back, it's like, why didn't I do this sooner? It's just a lot of frustration. My mom didn't get to see me succeed from where I was to where I am now. And the only real thing that I was able to give her was for her to see me in sobriety, to break that barrier and to heal myself. And well, I guess, just to heal myself from alcoholism, but just to navigate my way through all of these different things like grief and that was the biggest one for me was grief, losing her and going through college and graduating and not having her there. That was really hard for me. And it still is. But I always hear her in the back of my head, even today, like, just the little things she would tell me or her words of encouragement and stuff. And that's what really helps me to keep going and the search for my sister, I think a lot of families, they really get discouraged from and not being able to rely on the justice system and they give up because they can't win. We can't win. And so a lot of them give up and they get tired, they get burnt out from it. But for me, it just sparks a whole nother fire in me. And it's like, I have to do this, If I don't do it, who's going to do it for her? Nobody will. I mean, people all the time they'll say they're sorry. I'll share your sister's story. I'll, do this and I'll do that. But most of the time they don't. For me to do this work by myself and to advocate for her, I know it will get done. I know what I'm capable of. I know what I could do, and I'm going to keep doing it and I'm going to keep trying until I get something out of it, until she gets something out of it, until the other families can get something out of it. All we want is the closure and all we want is the justice. And until I get any of that, I'm still going to be here doing this work for her and for the families, in the community that I come from. It's being in a border town. It really, it has its perks, but at the same time, it's hard to, even get the jurisdictions to work with each other. I've tried to ask the BIA to take over my sister's case, but from what they have explained to me is they can't go to Shiprock Police Department and demand, like, you need to hand the case over to us. They have to ask. And Shiprock Police Department said no. And it's like, why not? You're not doing anything in her case. Like, why don't you give it to somebody who's willing to take another look at it from a different perspective? They said the same thing to FBI. FBI tried to get involved because she was a minor, Nope. this is our case. We're working on it. So it's like, why not? And I'm just wondering, are they hesitant to hand her case over because it'll highlight their failures even more? It'll show who was at fault? Or are they trying to cover something up that, I don't know. And one of the things that I recently found out was, I mentioned before that it was hard for us to find the original case number to my sister's missing person report. And that was because when they took the initial report that my mom made of her going missing, and every time somebody called in with a lead, or a sighting of her, they would open up a new case and then a new case and a new case and a new case. So there's 5 different cases out there for my sister that have tips or sightings or whatever. Instead of documenting it under the initial report, they kept opening a new case. So it was at the very bottom of the stack. And then they said they found some of her belongings scattered alongside the road, as if somebody, driving down the road was throwing her item, digging through her purse and throwing the items out as they're driving down the road. So they picked all that stuff up. Some of it we were able to identify as it being hers, and others, it was unrecognizable. We didn't know. We were unable to identify it as it being hers. So they took that, and now it's gone. I don't know what they did with that evidence or what they did with her belongings or who has it. The police department, they were the ones who picked it up and said they were going to give it to the criminal investigators. Now the criminal investigators office is like, we don't have that stuff. So where did it go? Why is this even happening? How did her case fall through all the possible cracks there are to the reporting, to the case, or the case reportings, to the NCIC database, to the evidence being lost? It's like, what is going on here? This is a major failure on your part. Take accountability for that and do better instead of pointing the finger back and forth to each other and say, oh, well, the police department are at fault. And then the police department saying, well, criminal investigators are the ones who messed it up. Just take accountability for it and use this as a model example of what not to do and what to do and how to fix it, and instead of blaming each other.
That is just on multiple levels of errors. And I'm like, yeah, you're completely right. Just say, you know what? I'm at fault. How can I fix this? Let's move forward with and let's do our job, so
yeah.
it's not that
it's
hard.
Kids bickering.
Yeah.
Oh, they did it. No, they did it. Don't lie. You did it. It's just say, okay, I did it. I'm sorry. I haven't even gotten one apology from anybody from the Shiprock Police Department or the Criminal Investigators Office saying, we made a mistake. We failed you guys. We could have done better, but we didn't. Nothing. Nobody wants to take accountability for that. And it's disgusting to me. It's like, how can you live with yourself knowing that you made these mistakes and you can't even tell the family that you're sorry, that you messed up? And what are you going to even try to do to make it better? Not even for them, but for all the families to follow. And it's so frustrating. And then when you go to the criminal investigator's office, or if you call over there, nobody wants to talk to you. And I don't know. And that right there, it makes me, so now my next goal right now is to complete my bachelor's degree. And I want to take the bar exam for the Navajo Nation, because I think that's all it requires is a bachelor's degree in criminal justice, and I'll have that soon. And that makes me eligible to take the bar exam, which I want to do, and be able to take my sister's case over completely, fully, give everything to me. I don't want you to have it anymore. It's mine now. You're not doing anything with it anyway. So why not just give it to me? I don't know. I mean, I probably could do it in a civil way, but from now until next May, I'm going to be doing all my research on that and to figure out like how can I take this case for myself? And that way I have the opportunity to give it to BIA myself. I have the opportunity to involve the FBI and the US Marshals to give it to these bigger entities that maybe could help me to see what they have documented under her file, if they even have anything documented in there, and to have these other law enforcement agencies take a look at what Shiprock Police Department and criminal investigators have been holding back from them, and to give it to somebody who will do something with it. And that's what I want to do. That's my goal right there, because they're just basically sitting on their ass, not even trying to do anything about it. And it's 20 years later. Like, you guys could have taken the police report when my mom first, or when her first reaction, or her first interaction with you, taken that report, ran with it. Maybe we could have found something right away. We could have gotten down to why she went missing in the very beginning. Instead, 20 years later, when all the evidence is gone, all the information probably isn't even in there from when I talked to these 5 different officers,
Mm.
It's just, it's disgusting.
Mhm.
It's really disservice to me and my family. It's like, why? I mean, just give it to me. I
Mhm.
could probably get more out of this than you can. I could probably, at least then I have control of it, and in who I want to look at that case file that they have, instead of it just sitting there on the file cabinet collecting dust.
Right. It's and I think that's an awesome, wonderful. I just thinking about what a family would have to go through, because you have to do the FOIA, which is the Freedom of Information Act, and they'd give you bare minimum, and you had to wait a couple of years to even receive it. So I'm thinking by the time you even graduate with your bachelor's, you're going to be literally 10 steps ahead of any other family member who's going through the civil way, like the FOIA. I mean, you have full reins and control of everything that goes on with your sister's case. I think that's amazing. I will, if you could keep me in contact with your steps of every way, I would love to follow you in your journey, because that's so exciting to know that you'll be able to do that. And this could probably give a lot of hope to other families too, who are going through the
Yeah,
same
it'll help
thing.
me. It'll help me to help them and teach them
Mm-hmm.
how to navigate the system. Where, like, you hit a barrier here, well, you can go this route.
Mm-hmm.
You hit that barrier, you could go this route. And it's all trial and error for me. And that's the reason why I like what I do, like the job that I'm in, the advocacy that I do. It's not, it's not to, what do they say? It's not to like build my ego. It's for me to be able to share this information with the families. Like,
Mm-hmm.
this is how I've had to do it. I mean, 20 years later, it's now or never, but this is what I did. This is how I had to do it. And these are the steps that I had to go through. And for me to be able to share everything that I had to go through with somebody else to help them navigate the system in a much faster way, I mean, that's a win-win for me.
Mm-hmm.
It For
Yeah.
them I don't know, like, just to help them avoid all of this hurt and all of this lost time and, all the barriers. That to me, I wish somebody would have done that for me.
Mm-hmm.
But for me to be able to give that to another family would be even more,
Yeah.
because that's just a line that can just keep going on and on and on, and even maybe make something of it.
Oh, for sure. You're like officially the person from the inside. That's a very strong position for you and for anyone else who would follow suit, because the more that we have people of color and indigenous involved in this system that's been broken, maybe we
Mm-hmm.
can fix it. Maybe we can recorrect it. Maybe we can give out free workshops to people who are in the same scenario to make them stronger, to make them more literate in how to maneuver around these red tape and these obstacles that are given to them because of their circumstance. And you can eliminate that invisible line of discrimination and disservice that's been done to people of color and indigenous communities and the families.
And not only that, just to have these different jurisdictions work with each other instead of
Mm-hmm.
against each other. It's like you guys are all in it for the same reason. Why not collaborate and make a stronger unit of it and
Exactly.
provide a better service? Maybe you get a better outcome from it. Not only
Mm-hmm.
that, like maybe the families would want to actually turn to you and trust you instead of doing their own investigations and, not even wanting to communicate with law enforcement. And one of the big things here where I live is jurisdiction,
Mm-hmm.
because I live on a border town, like right at the edge of a border town to the Navajo Nation. And the Navajo Nation doesn't want, the border town police department coming into their jurisdiction, which doesn't make any sense to me because that's more resources right there for you.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, why don't you take that opportunity? And I know in this community where I'm from, all the officers are, what do they call it? Cross trained, or what do they call that? They
Yes,
have that here,
they do.
but they don't utilize it. And
Yeah. I was thinking like there should be someone like as a medium. Like if you want to hire a third party who actually works as a liaison between the two.
that's another thing, another barrier that we're facing here. So I've been trying to get certified to be a tribal advocate.
Mm-hmm.
And in order to get that certification, I have to get a letter from the judge in the community that I will be serving. So the closest community for me is Shiprock, right? So this is going to be my third year trying to get that letter to become a legal advocate for the Shiprock district. And there's been a lot of pushback from them. And it's like, why don't you guys want this for your community? Because having a legal advocate, they could be the liaison between the family and the law enforcement.
Mm-hmm.
Because one, law enforcement is not trauma informed, and their approach to the family is just, it makes things worse. So to have that middle guy, the liaison person, do the interactions for the law enforcement to the families and vice versa, that could alleviate a lot of frustration, I think, and it
Mm-hmm.
could alleviate a lot of disconnect. And what is that?
Miscommunication or
Yeah. And it's like,
yeah. That's so
we're here,
powerful.
we're trying to help, and
Yeah.
it's really frustrating. Like, I don't know what their pushback is. I don't know. I'm pretty sure they have the funding for it, but they're not allocating it to the areas that it needs to be used in.
Of
And
course.
it's like, do something, make a difference, make a change, move forward, step away from the cultural aspect of the criminal court system. I know that they keep it there because they don't want to implement the westernized, judicial system into their courts. But then again, you guys aren't doing anything with this, with the, what you have in place for yourself. Just, you
Mm-hmm.
don't have to implement the whole westernized part of it. At least take some of that
Mm-hmm.
and put it together with the cultural aspects of it to change it, to make it better, to make it stronger, I don't
Yeah.
know.
That is so, yeah. It's like I think that's the best way to go. And they probably do have the funds. They're just
Sitting on it.
someone's probably trickling the funds to someone else's pocket, and
Oh, yeah.
it's a whole thing. Believe me, we'll be here for
Uh-huh.
hours talking about how the system is so screwed and so messed up. And the better thing is to actually take charge and like you are doing. That's what we're needing. We're needing more of this because this is how we're going to make the change.
Some of the things that I have as
Mm-hmm.
far as like guidelines and things like that we have for the Navajo Nation and from our coalition. But yeah, I can look through some things and send them your way, and then that way it could be shared. Because we're a nonprofit organization. We could always use some donations, to
Absolutely.
especially for MMIWR. And it's really neat now that we're able to implement that more into our grant writing. So we get a little bit more funding for that. So right now, the grant that I have, I've been able to do workshops. So the first workshop I did was fundamentals and awareness rally for MMIWR. And that was just the basics of like safety and permits and security and stuff like that. And this next piece that I have coming up, it's a media outreach piece.
Tiffany was last seen on her way to classes at Shiprock Northwest High School in Shiprock, New Mexico at 8:20 a.m. on May 17, 2004. She never arrived at school and has never been heard from again. She was carrying a black backpack and a purse with her nickname, KC, printed on it when she was last seen. After her disappearance, her makeup bag was found at a well-known party area at the base of the Carrizo Mountains near Sweetwater, Arizona. Numerous items of clothing were also found in the area, but the clothes could not be identified as Tiffany's. Her case remains unsolved. If you have any information on disappearance of Tiffany Reid, contact the Shiprock Police Department at 505-368-1350.